Good morning and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspectives. I'm Michael Bartlett.
And I'm Merrylin LeBlanc. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Merrylin. We were just having an interesting conversation about
Tattoos. And I was telling Michael about how years ago, probably a couple decades ago, Carolyn Mace, who's a spiritual teacher and written many books on spirituality of various sorts, who was having a conversation with some young people who had lots of tattoos and talking about how the tattoo, and she actually went back in time, to older cultures where you'd see, especially Aboriginal cultures where you'd see people with tattoos, and how it was a way of perhaps reminding us that we are more than what you see on the surface, that there's a spirit within, there's a deeper meaning to who we are and to what we're here for. And
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I was thinking, it's very, like we were talking about before, and you named it, it's very scorpionic. And here we are, with Mercury and Mars and the sun, and then Mars opposing Uranus. I mean, that's kind of like a tattooing. That's kind of like this, being marked or branded, so to speak, in a way, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It's like this kind of like awakening to spirit, or penetrating through the veils to a much more broader understanding of the cosmos that we live in.
The first one I got actually was when I found out that I had Pluto on my ascendant, actually. And then I decided I would get a dragon. I wanted to have, basically was like, if I'm going to go walk into the underworld, I want to have a totem with me. And I like how you said it, you named it. It's like, it's, first, like you said, it's something that's like we're more than just our surface, but it's also a way to call forth, sacred magic, sacred geometry, sacred symbols that actually empower us and remind us of actually who we are in those moments when it's easy for us to forget.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting too, the conversations with people of late that I've had have a lot to do about our consciousness and recognizing that there's more than than what we typically see on the surface that really matters. And juxtaposed to that, we have concerns about the economy and all the goods not being there for people in their holiday shopping, etc. And for the people that I interact with a lot, none of that matters. It's sort of like, oh well.
You mean that the advertising saying, or I mean the news telling you that products aren't going to be available hasn't created an instinctual terror within you?
Oh dear, what will I do? I mean, it's nice to see holiday decorations and certain common rituals of people getting together, certain songs and all of that. That's it. But in terms of actually buying more goods, it's not.
You're like being such a poster child for an Aquarian talking about a holiday. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
Look.
Well, if COVID hasn't prepared us for this, I would feel like a lot of people have been. I know a lot of people are tired of the restrictiveness of COVID and they're not caring anymore. But in fact, I mean, over the past almost 2 years, for the most part, the shopping I've done has been grocery shopping, period. End of story. I mean, there have been a few other excursions for various reasons, some of them important, but, but and some of, I don't know if we've talked about this on this show, but I have had conversations with people about retail businesses. And of course, even before COVID, more and more people were shopping online to places like Amazon, and there's other, a lot of businesses, Best Buy, you name it, they have their online shopping. And so the trend is away from going into a store in any event, and COVID just amped that number up. And in some cases you go, why bother going back to that old model? There might
See,
be
there's some parts of it that are kind of important. I mean, I've been doing a lot more shopping online than ever before, but there's certain things that are just really super challenging. The feel of a fabric, the texture. I mean, I've, between my Scorpio moon and my and with Neptune there, and then across from Jupiter and Taurus, it's about the quality, a lot of times in training.
you can always send it back, Of
Yeah,
course,
that's such a tedious thing. And then shoes are like the worst. And women, I think, already know that whatever shoe they're going to get is never going to fit anyway. So they know about returning. But there's just something for me, like I almost, like a one pair that I end up getting, I just end up giving them away because it's all this stuff that you have to do. And if it is only like, if I only pay a certain amount for it, then I don't mind. I'll just like, okay, well, I'm going to donate these and, someone else and find someone who can fit into them.
Well, you find a brand or brands that work for you, and you can, do those online if they're consistent. I know there occasionally there's anomalies, but what's also interesting that we start out with consumerism, because this coming Saturday, is it Saturday, Friday night, Saturday? It's right after midnight, depending on where you live. So it's, for some people it's late Saturday, some people it's early Sunday. We have a lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus, which is the sign that we would mostly associate with consumer goods, with the material world, but also with the natural world. So there's not, it's not all, what we find in stores that are man-made. And the eclipse brings up a whole different energy about this whole shopping phenomenon. I think in the news, we're beginning to see some of the problems, because energy precedes and follows. And some of the problems that they're having is the inflation. The stores don't have the stock that they normally had. Some blame it on the shipping problems. Well, instead of addressing, how do we not have this occur again? We're just like, it's just caught up in the instance. So, we'll just charge more prices. And in one report I was listening to the other day, they just said, some people will lower their prices again once that goes away, and others won't. And, it's kind of it's not really addressing a core issue, which I think eclipses are trying to get at. And interestingly enough, this lunar eclipse is symbolized by a woman reawakening to romance. I believe that's what I have it written down somewhere here. A mature woman. I'm a mature woman, reawakening, but it's an eclipse. If this were a regular full moon, one might say to me personally, oh, there might be some relationships in your life that amp up to another level or something of that sort.
Or a revelation, is that another way?
Yeah, the insights you get about it.
Right.
Could be, yes.
Insights, especially I would think from Taurus to Scorpio, because it's so instinctual, right? It's so much involved, like our kind of attachments in a way, and both signs being fixed. And then it's interesting because Pluto is also at the same time sextiling that sun in Scorpio and wide trining that the opposite point.
Eclipse, the lunar eclipse
point. Exactly. So it's like really, this is really going to be, some pretty I would think there'd be really great opportunity for transformation and really changing one's opinions about things that are, I don't know, I always think of Pluto, it's like, even when it's soft, or supportive aspects like a trine or a sextile, it's still, I mean, there's still something that has to be paid. you know.
Yeah, you don't get to the underworld without paying the toll. Going across
Exactly.
the
Yeah, you've always got to
rivers.
have those two coins, you know, like the Irish still put the coins on the eyes. So like, you know, when you go to cross the river Styx, you want to make sure you're going to get to the other side. But the other thing I think of too, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is that there are so many people with an incredible amount of wealth now. And wouldn't it be great if everything was like charged based on how much you earned? You know, because like just the basic minimums that people have to try and pay for, everyone's paying that same amount regardless of what kind of income you
Oh,
have.
I
So
see what
like
you're
wealthy people can stockpile all that stuff, where people who are barely making it by can barely even afford to get it, so they're having to get less quality things. So
Well, but then you'd have to have all of this revelation about people's worth financially, and that, and in a way, you're bringing up a scorpionic kind of issue, because Scorpio does not want. I mean, Scorpio is about amassing money, but Scorpio doesn't want other people to know about that.
no, it's very
No,
secret.
not at all.
And it's
It's
funny
very
because what do they want? They're recently, and this is interesting because of what's going on as we're talking about these planets and revelations about finances, is they're what, you know, Congress is wanting to make it so that that banks are reporting information about its clients to the IRS. And everyone's up in arms about it, but I mean, is there a reason why it shouldn't be that way? You know, you know, and here I'm a
Well,
Scorpio
I,
moon.
and I guess what surprised me, but then in fact, the banks wouldn't be involved unless there was an investigation by the IRS, such as what they're doing. The IRS isn't necessarily doing it, but what's happening to the Trump Foundation or the Trump empire,
Yeah,
where they're having to subpoena records, et cetera, and get at them. Um, so that would be very unpopular.
I'm sure it would be, but I mean,
I know that what you're getting at, I think, let me see if I'm right. And please correct me if I'm not, is that, taxes has a bad rep. But what are taxes about? Taxes are about having schools, having healthcare facilities, hospitals, et cetera, having roads, having firefighters, having ambulances, having bridges, having a structure that supports public interaction.
national
And
parks, city
and
local parks.
and we need to get back to that. Maybe we need to rename it or something. But everybody kind of, I don't want to pay any taxes. Well, then you don't want community. You don't want roads. I mean, let's get real basic. You don't want roads. You don't want firefighters. Some communities I forget it, maybe over a decade ago, they tried having like private firefighting things. And there was a story where one guy didn't pay for, I don't remember where this was, didn't pay for it. And his house did catch on fire and they went right by, they just ignored it. He's not a member, that the house burned down. I mean, do you want that kind of community?
I mean, I guess you have the means to afford to be in that kind of a community. I mean, that's the point. Is, I mean, the idea with taxes that everyone should supposedly be paying a proportional rate. But the hard part is, over the years, people with money have had lobbyists go in there and change the tax laws and change the tax laws.
And that goes
and the
down.
result is, to be honest, I mean, people can look. I mean, there was a time, when you talked about, not paying taxes, and that was kind of a meaning that, that you had a good accountant and you ran your business in a way that it worked out kind of fine. But now, it's this wonderful parlor trick, and Trump has shown the amazing, I mean, he's given us a slight glimpse of how the wealthy hold their money and what they do with it and how they play with it. And it's a very different experience. People don't hold things individually anymore.
Yeah, right. So it's like you
create companies. I mean, it's so Scorpio Taurus, right? I mean, and here we are with this.
And what's interesting is too about what you're just saying is how some of those various individuals or corporations use the public taxpayers' money. And I would say, case in point, those billionaires who went up into space with their own rockets. The technology that got them there was developed off of our taxes. Now, tell me, how much? I don't know. Maybe they had to pay for some of that stuff. How much do they have to pay? I'd love to know that. I'd love
and also,
to.
how many people could they have fed? How many people, how many police officers could have been paid and a bump in their salary, or teachers or fire people, all
Instead of that, yeah.
all that as what about all the individuals who work for their companies at the bottom rung making a small amount of money? Why aren't those people all making a living, more living wage, and getting the benefits they deserve? And it's this weird thing of like, it's like that idea, all the things that those Republican things, like, the trickle down theory. It's not trickle down, it's trickle up. No child left behind. It's like, if you're poor, it's every child left behind. It's like, there are caveats. There's a silent comma statement after each of those that we aren't hearing about, but are completely about what these things are about. And I just think it leaves our country bereft. That's the experience we're having now. We have individuals who, are somehow aggrandizing this lack of intelligence and lack of awareness about what's going on at the expense of their own benefit and their families.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the haves is not, they're not looking at the whole picture, and there's this kind of prejudicial attitude. And I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody. Prejudice is not rational. Has nothing to do with rational thinking. So you have to kind of move into and this is interesting because it's the Scorpio realm. You have to move into the realm of consciousness. The water signs really address consciousness. And interestingly enough, the sign that talks about shared energy, Pisces also, but are used to manipulate people and lead them astray in terms of their beliefs and stuff. This is not unity. I want to go back a minute to that symbol of the mature woman reawakened to romance. We're thinking romance like it's a leonine thing where you're, candle lights and flowers and candies and stuff like that. But there's also a romance that one can have with certain projects, certain issues. Like I think about the people who are committed to immigration reform, for example, or let's get money out of politics. Let's shift these systems that aren't working for everybody. There's a certain quality. If you join a group that's bent on bringing about a major change, and it's a nonprofit group, but they're basically looking at change on a societal level, better healthcare for everybody, for children, for immigrants, whomever. There's a certain quality of and romance is a strange word to bring to that, but it's dedication. It's deep caring, and I mentioned the sign of Leo, and Leo isn't just about romance. It's about children. It's about creativity. You think, often, obviously artists come to mind who are just really dedicated to the kind of creativity that they're engaged in and want to bring forth. Somebody who is prolific, say, even in writing books, has other signs involved, but they really have a lifetime romance with their craft, with what they're doing. I want to emphasize that with this particular eclipse energy, because it's not going to hit all of us like, oh, there's this person in my life that, you know, there's a spark that just, it's a relate, it's not necessarily, and here, I mean, because Taurus isn't really necessarily about relationships, although this is the Capricorn decadent, yeah, or decan of Taurus, which is a social sign, but it's social on that broad, larger public institutional level. And so it makes me think about how the issues that people are engaged in, like we've just seen a couple trials, we're still seeing, we haven't heard the ultimate outcomes yet of them in this country, and people have very passionate concerns about justice, and 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 maybe some of the outcomes might awaken people to a more passionate involvement in reform in this country on that level. So I just kind of wanted to interject that, because we started very much with the lightweight side of Taurus, the Christmas shopping, the gifts, the beauty, the physical beauty, etc. But you know, there is this other side, because all of the zodiac signs are contained within the zodiac. I mean, within any given sign of the zodiac, and so this is kind of like a Venus Saturn energy, which really says, you know, what are our values about the systems that we live in, about the structures that we live in, and do we care about them? I mean, I think some people don't care about them. Obviously, I think January 6th was an example of people who don't care about existing structures, both physical and metaphorical.
Well, I think they do, but
yeah. I don't know what they're thinking really, but I'm just saying actions speak louder than words.
I mean, yeah, in addition, I mean, we've got that Mars and the Mercury there in Scorpio. I mean, it's, you know, it's got there's that passion with it. And I like what you said, that's because I think, you know, when we're in a relationship with something, it's like we show up in our best way. You know, we show up in ways that, you know, that we take care of ourselves a little bit better, like you said, but then there's also just a way that we act maybe a little bit more magnetically. So what are we attracting? What are we not attracting in our lives?
And again, the eclipse energy, this is not going to come easy. This is, you know, eclipses generally, unless somebody is really already working on issues related to it, eclipses bring up conflict. They bring up things that need to be worked on. And yeah.
And so in esoteric astrology, Taurus and Scorpio are the fourth ray, which is harmony through conflict. And any of us who have the planets in these signs or have friends with these signs, we know that, you know, there's no one who can get into like stuff like a Taurus or a Scorpio can.
I'm laughing only because this full moon is exactly opposite my moon, exactly. And also, well, within a degree of my Uranus as well, because that
means the sun. That means the sun's on those two spots.
The sun is on my moon, but the moon is on my Uranus.
Yeah.
So, oh
shake
gosh,
it up, baby. Now shake it up, baby. Twist and shout.
Little 60s there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also, you know, Mars is still in opposition to Uranus. I mean, it's a potent picture. I would say that one of the things that I would say with this particularly is that Scorpio and Taurus also have this amazing ability to pretend that something isn't there. this amazing ability to kind of walk around the pink elephant in the room, which requires that that elephant gets so huge that an explosion of sorts occurs. And I'd say particularly with this kind of energy, if you're not really addressing what your needs are, if you're not, and especially if you have a lot of planets or, and it's, you know, one of your angles in Scorpio or Taurus, just be prepared. Like if you might be up for some, you know, some rude awakenings to things that you just kind of have placated and made okay. Because Scorpio just, it's like, to me, it's like really much about a boiling pot syndrome. Boiling frog syndrome. We can keep adjusting to the heat, and then all of a sudden we reach a point of, you know, explosive energy. And with that Pluto in there involved, I just think, you know, try and be as compassionate with yourself as possible, especially in your relationships. Realize that, especially when it comes to relationships, when problems are happening, that that other person isn't the only one in the relationship. You're also in that relationship, and so self-responsibility really helps in these areas. And trying to, rather than blaming the other person, maybe just saying like, hey, maybe this isn't the right relationship. Maybe this isn't. We shouldn't be spending as much time together in this way, regardless of what type of relationship, friendship, work, sexual, marriage, whatever the type of relationship is. I mean, there's an aspect of discrimination here, I feel, that's being called forth. I mean, when an eclipse happens, it's like there's this way that the light is shown in a very different manner. It gives us it kind of wakes us up into a different reality. We see the light is different, so we actually see everything differently. Allow yourself to see things differently. Allow yourself to perceive what is actually there, rather than any kind of wishful thinking, or especially like the thing with The Secret, you know, if you keep affirming it, it's going to happen. No, if there's crap there, it's still going to be crap. So, you know, maybe it's time that you realize that, you know, a relationship or two that you have aren't feeding you the right way, or that you're not acting the right way in certain relationships, and how, you know, what are the best ways to adjust that?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think in terms of even the physical formation of the eclipse, where it's the earth coming between the sun and the full moon. And it's sort of like the consciousness, the super consciousness of the sun in the darkness of the moon is saying, oh, those things that you've hidden in your mind, in your subconscious, need to be looked at. They are popping up. They're ready to, they're saying, you know, hey, I need I need to be regurgitated or something.
Well, it's funny, like one of my examples for this is kind of like, you know, where like we take these little things that go on in relationships or with other people, and we just go like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put a little bit of that under the rug. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to address it. So you're sweeping a little bit of stuff under the rug. Well, after a while, there's so much stuff under the rug that when you walk across it, you trip and you fall flat on your face. It's not pretty. It's not nice. But it's the accumulation of not addressing issues as they come up. And I think that's what Scorpio really helps us do. And especially with the strength of Taurus, with that Uranus over there as well, and that moon that's going to be awakening things. It's like, you know, it's time to, you know, it's like, you know, what is it? You know, why are you feeling agitated? I mean, Taurus is also very physical, right? And Uranus and the moon there, that means, you know, that's emotional, physical irritation that can go on within an individual too. So, you know, probably a really good time to take a walk. You know, if you start getting really upset, take a walk, move your body.
Take a walk. Yeah, it was kind of, you know, it's interesting as Venus is in Capricorn at that time, the ruler, but she's not making, you know, a strong aspect to that lunation. She's like 14 degrees away from trining it. Well, she's pretty much in a sesquiquadrate relationship then, I imagine. And so it can be triggering the action to do something, and or at least to be aware, you know, thinking about if there's something going on in your life at this time that is similar to, you know, your past history, not doesn't have to be your long lost past history, but it could be current or recent, then recognize that and kind of get in touch with it and say, do I really want to keep doing the same thing over and over, or how would I rather have all of this play out?
Because Venus and Mars are sextile, and Venus is also trining Uranus, like dead on at the time of the eclipse. So, I mean, there's really, I think it really is about our relationship, but it really is about discernment. It's like, what do you value? What is really right for me? That's the hard part. I think a lot of times, like when we have to end things, or when we have to separate from people, or we have to just kind of put a stronger boundary up. It's this thing of feeling like they were rejecting another person, but what it is we're actually accepting ourselves. We're saying like, hey, you know what? This is what I need in order to feel better. I can't have someone around me who is criticizing my every move. I can't have someone around me who, promises to show up for things, and every time when I call up to say, hey, when are you coming, they don't show up. I mean, those are large issues, but I mean, there are these things, and it's like, it doesn't mean that you don't have to be in a relationship with them, but it's like you begin to learn like, hey, I'm not going to call up on that person to be there for me because they aren't going to show up. It's the old story of, picking up the snake, the woman walking along, and the snake says, hey, can you give me a ride? And she says, well, but you're a snake, you're going to bite me. She says, why would I do that? You're going to carry me to where I need to go. And so they go along and have this wonderful time, and they talk and have a great time, and finally get to the point where, it's time. The snake says, okay, here's where I get off. And she goes and picks up the snake, puts it down, and the snake bites her. And she goes, ow, what did you do that for? And she says, I'm a snake. But we tell it, and that's what I think Scorpio is really about, is really like, because like everything in our society right now is like teaching us to negate what we actually feel. We have politicians telling us things that aren't true. We have all these untruths that are going around, and people are just trying to find out what it is. And I think what it is the removal of people's ability to understand what is true for themselves. It's all this acquiescence of self-responsibility that we continue to give over to authority figures, thinking that they're going to save us, but they aren't here to save us. They're there for their own self-interest in many times. And so the thing is like, what is the way that we can save ourselves? What is the ways that we can make right changes in ourselves? And a lot of times I find that is learning to say yes and no to the right people in your life.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up like the politicians in the United States, because I was looking earlier this morning, I was looking at where this eclipse falls in the United States Constitution chart, as well as the Declaration of Independence chart. And in both of those, the eclipse falls in the 6th house. And what I kind of related to at that time, and we mentioned this earlier, is that, the whole inflation thing right now, and people getting back to the employment situation, which is still not back to where it was before for various reasons. There's different angles on that, but the 6th house bringing up the daily work life of Americans, and with inflation and COVID, and the problems aren't over yet. The solutions aren't fully there yet.
Yeah.
And the solutions involve each of us participating, but we're seeing, in the news, there's just one horror story after another, based on just the COVID situation. And so, yeah, Americans, wake up. That's us.
An opportunity. I think, doesn't this also, the eclipse, I think, follows something significantly in Biden's chart as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's a Scorpio. Well,
Scorpio 12th house.
In its 12th house, so it would be in his 6th house as well. And it's whole interesting. It's like, I heard one of the talking heads I heard talk about this, the whole infrastructure bill that finally got passed, at least that in some form, is how the administration didn't really get out on the road and sell it much. The only thing, you had to really be tuned into the news cycles to hear much about it, as versus somebody showing up in town and giving a talk, or your your local politicians talking about it, et cetera. And yeah, there's something going on there. I don't know if it's COVID or what, but there's a sort of like a little bit too, because what they did was huge, even though it wasn't as big as initially. And there's still the Build Back Better bill, which will probably, I don't know, where that'll get through.
We might have to wait till those planets move into Pisces or something.
Well, there was this little opening, this little opening of Republicans voting common sense and benefiting from it, and yet the end results of reactions on some people's part, just unbelievable. I mean, our country is definitely polarized, and I've heard people compare it to Hitler's early days of building his
base.
His Nazi party. And I mean, sort of, I don't know how many Americans really realize how fragile our country is right now. Very fragile. And so it was,
I mean, it's a Pluto return. I mean, it's not meant to be easy.
None of us lives to personally have Pluto returns. We have for some people it was in their late 30s, early 40s, Pluto square Pluto, which is what Americans have typically called the midlife crisis. I certainly went through one. I don't know about you, Michael.
I'm still going through it.
You're still going through it. And no, it's not an easy time. It's not.
But most of us will also be able to have our Pluto opposition, which is
that'll be
born after 1920 is likely to have their Pluto opposition. So a lot of our friends who are in their 80s and 90s are getting to experience that, along with Uranus return. So that's quite a doozy. So yeah, I mean,
we're moving through it. I mean, it's not an easy time. But the opposition sometimes can be a little easier than the square. Squares and the harmonics of 4 have a lot more tension going for them. With the opposition, the typical image is the teeter-totter. And yeah, you can flip one person way up or way, when things are really bad, you may find that it's really hard to get off the ground at an opposition, or to get back down to earth.
I like that. And it's also, to be honest, the opposition and conjunction are also 4th harmonics. All 3, along with the square, are all 4th harmonic aspects.
Yeah.
They'll show up together because they're all of the same modality.
Yeah. So yeah, wonderful times we're living in.
May you live in interesting times. Kali Yuga times are quite the interesting times, and we are definitely this gives us a little bit of sighting. Be interesting. There was the shooting in Aurora. It's gonna be interesting what other kind of violent things happen with this. This is a lot of built up energy that's going on. So please, everyone out there, be as safe as possible. If you like what we're offering here, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please tell your friends. Thank you for the comments that people are leaving. Thank you for subscribing. We really appreciate knowing that people are at least listening to something we're saying out there. It's kind of fun. How can people find you, Miss Merrylin?
Moonwiseastrology.com.
And I can be reached at coremichael.com. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, Merrylin.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.